Hello everyone, and welcome along to episode 97 of the Hunger for the Hustle podcast. A special episode, and one me and my friend Yury, who's joining me today, have been trying to get together for a while. We're both very busy boys, and despite a few 3 or 4 reschedules, here we are on this Monday afternoon to bring you an episode all about psychedelic psychotherapy. Yury is a very good friend of mine, someone I'm proud to call a very good friend of mine, and has actually, I would say, been someone who's been instrumental in helping me integrate, move my life from one side of the world to the other, which isn't an easy job. So thanks for that, Yury, and thanks for being a good mate to start with. Let me tell you a bit more of what I know about Yury before I'm sure he can tell you a bit better of what he knows about himself and his chosen profession. Dr. Yury Shamis is a man of many talents, full of entrepreneurial spirit, and the ingredient that we do love in this podcast, the hunger for the hustle. Yury is a multiple business owner and operator, as well as a practising psychotherapist with a refreshing, that's not a word, a refreshing, holistic approach. Yury says, I see therapy not as a doctor-patient scenario, but rather as 2 colleagues tackling a problem. And I think that's a really nice, refreshing way to look at it. Yury also specialises in the niche, but rapidly growing global trend of psychedelic integration therapy. And this will be the main subject of what we're talking about today. Yury, mate, welcome to the show. How are you on this sunny Monday afternoon in Melbourne?
Thanks, Jake. Thanks for the nice introduction. I'm very well, thank you.
Good. I'm pleased to hear it. And Yury, let's kind of rewind back to your story. I mean, what made you want to start studying psychotherapy? And I know you did that for many years. You know, you did your initial studying and then went on to do a master's, as I understand, and of course got your doctorate, which is quite a lot of work. So what kind of started kicking that off? What made you want to study psychotherapy?
I think it starts off with being an unhappy kid, struggling to fit in with society, struggling to fit in with school, and I think mainly having issues, I guess, communicating my needs and feeling held and understood. So you naturally gravitate towards psychology, you know, which is the study of the mind, and I think the goal was to try and help myself feel better and feel more connected. So yeah, psychotherapy was something that I really passionately wanted to do, but there was a lot of anxiety and a lot of toxic shame that I carried. And naturally, yeah, it kind of ebbed and flowed. And as I grew as a person, so did my desire to pursue this kind of work increase and push me in this direction.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting how it came from a need from within of, you know, being that unhappy child, as you said, and then actually wanting to help others with some things, you know, that they may be struggling with and growing through. And as you know, it's always the way when you actually go out there and put yourself out in a position to help others, sooner or later that energy comes back to you and it feeds, you know, charges your battery up and fills your energy up as well.
Absolutely.
And did you always plan to go all the way with the study and get the doctorate, or did you just kind of develop as you went along?
The doctorate's actually in an unrelated field. The doctorate's in microbiology. So I think I went to uni and I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. Well, I wanted to be a psychologist originally, but I didn't get the marks for psychology. So I ended up doing a biochemistry degree and then adding the psychology to it. And then having finished the degree, I found psychology very, very rigid and kind of decided that it wasn't for me. There was not much of my personality, not much of my identity that could come through. So I went in the direction of microbiology and biochemistry and ended up doing a PhD in that. It was only years later, several years after finishing that I decide to come back and do a master's in psychotherapy. Got you.
Okay, so you kind of went around the full circle, decided it wasn't something for you, but then decided to come back to it and I suppose develop your own style with your therapy, something that you did. And I think, you know, I've seen a therapist for many, many years, about probably 3 years now. I've seen 2 different people who have just been really instrumental in helping in my life. And I think it's something I'm really keen and an advocate to talk about
going to see a therapist when you need help, asking for help essentially, not because you're weak, but because you want to remain strong. And I think it's a subject that is something kind of frowned upon and ridiculed in some way, particularly by young men. But I think I see going to see a therapist as like it's the brain for your gym, and you go there and you exercise the mind and exercise some of the things that are bothering you in the mind, and then some of the things that you make stronger over time.
Yeah.
So I think there's, I do think that the world is opening up to these conversations about mental health more and more, which is a fantastic thing, and that a lot of people have, there's a lot of more government support come around in the past kind of 12 to 18 months, even like you see in billboards and advertisements in bathrooms in places for, more government helplines to, Beyond Blue and services like that. So I think that's a great thing, and it's heading in the right direction. It's a shame it kind of took the global pandemic to push it along, but it's also, it's a very positive thing.
Absolutely, yeah. I think the great thing about psychotherapy now, or any kind of counseling now, is that it's becoming mainstream in the sense that you don't go to a therapist when there's something wrong with you. You go to a therapist just like you'd go to the gym. You want your mental and emotional health to be maintained, and people are becoming less and less stigmatized and afraid to ask for help, which makes my work a lot easier, because you're not getting people who are at the final stages of holding it together or at the early stages of falling apart. It's people who genuinely want a healthy relationship with their inner world.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. People often say, you go and see a psychotherapist when you're crazy. Well, it's almost a bit too late by that point, isn't it? Or it's not too late, but there's certainly a lot more work to do. It's about being proactive in the initial stages of it. And I often find, seeing a therapist is great. It'd be something I'll do maybe 2-3 times a month. Depends how stressful life is, what's going on. It's just as simple as that. But I also find that just having, deep, meaningful, open, honest conversations with people that you can trust in your life and be open with, almost just as helpful sometimes. I know me and you have had many of those conversations over the years, and it's been interesting, of course, because you're a psychotherapist and we're talking usually about kind of deep psych things, but I'm like, just talk to me as a friend, not a therapist, and it's always an interesting borderline that we skip back and forth across.
For sure. Yeah. I think the good thing about this kind of work is the goal is that you're not dependent on a therapist. So it's like when you go to a therapist and you're depressed, you get antidepressants, and people think, well, this is the cure for me, I'm getting antidepressants. I think in a good therapeutic relationship, the point is that you come back and forth for maintenance, but then you go and actually practice the stuff in everyday life, and you become more functional and more able to be your own therapist. I think that's the ultimate goal in this kind of work.
Yeah, I think I really agree with that. And I actually, it took me a long time until I started taking a journal with me to my therapist and started kind of taking notes, because I'm sat with him and I'm thinking, he's always taking notes. So maybe I should start taking notes. It took me about 1.5 years to think about that. But now I always take notes and take a little journal, and that helps me because, in that hour that I'll see them, you can talk about and unpack quite a lot of stuff, and you come away sometimes just only remembering small snippets of it. So I find it's really helpful to journal it, write it down, and then, like you say, be able to come back to that in your own time and reference that, and give that help to yourself. Be your own best friend. That advice that you would give to someone who's a really good friend of yours, give it to yourself, and be kind to yourself, and know that life is challenging, and it's certainly been a lot more challenging for everyone in the past 12 to 18 months, perhaps than it has for a collective amount of years before that. But I think it seems like things are opening up and turning the corner now, and in all parts of the world, as you know, most of my family are in the UK, and things are improving there. But that's a whole different kettle of fish. Let's get back to the topic in hand, and if you'd be kind enough to actually explain what psychedelic psychotherapy is, or psychedelic integration therapy, as it's
Sure.
as it's often called.
Sure. So psychedelic therapy is not literally therapy with psychedelics. It's a whole process. I think the most effective kind of psychedelic therapy, you do a lot of preparatory work beforehand. So you meet the client, you establish a therapeutic relationship. and you really identify what they're hoping to achieve. For me, that usually means identifying what the client's trauma is. And trauma is essentially any event that's happened that hasn't been emotionally processed is a trauma. And it usually affects us in adverse ways. So we try to identify what the trauma is. We teach the client how to sit with the trauma, how to really feel it in their body. Often during that preliminary stage, we can actually let the trauma go. But for those clients that it's not possible, we've brought the trauma up to the surface as much as we can. And then the trip itself is like a point and shoot exercise. It's not throw you into the psychedelic environment and hope that, things go for the best. There's an element of that, and there's an element of having whatever you need attended to really close to the surface, so that when the trip actually starts, it picks up the unresolved trauma and helps the person resolve it. Essentially, the ego dissolves, and your defenses that are normally blocking you from progressing to your own freedom are gone, and enables you to kind of get through whatever you need to do. On the other side of that, you're a different person. You have different ideas, you have different values, and your body is no longer protecting the trauma, but it doesn't often know that the trauma's gone. So the work on the other side is teaching you how to function in the world, being the new person you are, while still in some ways assuming you're the old character. So both the preliminary, the trip, and the integration steps are equally as important as each other.
Yeah, thanks for giving us the fuller picture there. And it's often the way, and I've had personal experiences with this, particularly with psilocybin or magic mushrooms as they're widely known. Often in an environment where I've done it where it's been more of a party environment, but I've found time within that space to take myself away from the party and really learn some lessons from what the natural sources are trying to teach me. And it's like you said, I think you can often get so far just with maybe what you would call a bit more conventional psychotherapy treatment, but it comes to a point where some of these things are that deep rooted in us for so many years. A lot of people don't really even become too self-aware, even like aware of their self in kind of any much way until their mid to late 20s. And sometimes these things can have been embedded in us from a child or even a toddler, some of these things that we deal with. So yeah, the psychedelic edge of things can, as I've said in my own personal experience, just take you over to that edge, take you over to that kind of other dimension, as they like to say, that really brings all the stuff out of you. And it's not always a completely pleasant experience, but I've found always a very beneficial one. And I know something that you've mentioned when I was looking at some information on your website, and you said that the value of it can often not always come at the time from a psychedelic experience. It can often be days or even longer than that afterwards.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. The process can go for a long time. I've had psychedelic experiences where I've worked through some heavy stuff and it was a year to integrate it. I was functioning in the world and I was actively catching myself responding to stimuli that would often be really triggering in a different way. And I'd have to catch myself and actually teach myself going, hey, this is not how you respond to this stuff anymore. You're a different person. But because, as you said, some of these traumas are so deep and started so young, it's branched into every aspect of your life. So you're not even aware of how profoundly impacted you are for when you release it.
Yeah, it's absolutely right, isn't it? And it's, it affects, it then affects, once you have something that's in you for so long and has been manifesting for so long, it starts to affect all the other people that you interact with in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And it can end up being actually not a very healthy, happy adult at all. But I mean, the great thing about this is that, and we probably should, I know it's important to make this clear that, psychedelic psychotherapy is not a legal practice in Australia at the moment. And what we're talking about here is, when you've travelled and practiced in countries where it is legal, in Australia at the moment, it is just, all intents and purposes, a research thing. But we're seeing actual government stuff. I know they've opened up psilocybin not too long ago as a form of palliative care, haven't they?
Yeah, end of life. Yeah, absolutely. And there's clinical studies coming out left, right, and centre for PTSD and depression. Unfortunately, at the moment, it's only for people who are treatment resistant. But I think that's the process that needs to happen to push it over the line, and then we hopefully work towards making it available to mainstream people. That's why, I mean, a large reason of the work that I do is psychedelic integration. It's people who are seeking out this kind of therapy on their own, as in psychedelic therapy on their own, and I help them plan and prepare for the experiences as well as make sense of them as well.
Yeah, you know, give them a safe guidance and a way to facilitate that, you know, because I would only ever say, I'm trying to think of an event where I would have done psychedelics when I was just from a sober state. I don't think it would have been that way. I think it would have always been when I was probably intoxicated in some other way. But I can draw on a particular experience I had with mushrooms at our much loved Rainbow Serpent Festival, which we haven't seen for a few years, but hopefully it returns sooner or later. A particular experience where I was really in a place where I was battling with my ego, you know, ego edging goodness out, and that's what it was really doing for me. I was in this kind of battle between Jake Fowler himself and Jake Fowler's ego, and I remember doing these mushrooms and going through the quite intense part where I was seeing 2 or 3 of various different things. And I was in the middle of the dance floor, and our friend Tommy goes to me. He said, "Mate, you should sit down." I was like, "No, I'm fine. You know, 6'4" bloke. I can handle anything. This is no problem." And he goes, "Mate, there's a chair just there for you. Please have a sit down and have a glass of water." So I must have outwardly looked like I was quite distressed, which I really was. And then I had to sit down, and then it all came to me then, and the psilocybin revealed to me at the time that something that sounds quite simple now on the face of it, but at the time to me it was revolutionary, and it was literally speaking to me. It was like not someone else in your head speaking to you. It was like another source kind of speaking to you, someone from a different place, and it basically said to me that your ego is a collection of ideas and opinions of other people of you that you're trying to live up to. It's not actually who you are, and you should stop doing that because it's of no service to you. And you know, relinquish it and let it go. And instantly, as soon as I made peace with that idea, I kind of came to and looked around, and everyone was just having a fantastic time. And then I just cracked on and just had a wonderful time. And I remember there was a few other elements of that where I was closing my eyes, and all these kind of, I could just see this field out in front of me, and all these kind of mushrooms were just growing out of everything, and everything was growing and expanding. And it was all around just a wonderful experience. But you know, it's there seems to always be a part with it in my experience where it gets a little bit distressful. I don't want to say dark, but I would be on the borderline of that. Certainly something a bit scary and overwhelming to start with. And once you've taken a psychedelic, that's it. You know, there's not really any out button. You know, there's not really a stop button or a miracle to bring you out of it, is there? It's like, you know, you've done it now and enjoy the ride because that's how it is. Would you agree with that?
With the aspect of the dark side of what's
well, yeah, with the fact that it's kind of always starts off a little bit rough until you settle and find your way, and then you learn the lesson and seem to come out the other side.
I think it's very context based. You know, taken in a festival environment, there's so many factors that you're not controlling, external to you and internal to you, that it's probably going to have an aspect of difficulty that's going to come up. Or not going to, but it's likely. You don't know whether it's your own stuff. You don't know if it's coming up from the dance floor. You're very subjective. So you're very sensitive to external environment as well. In the psychedelic session, we're essentially manipulating the set and setting in such a way that we're hoping something's going to come up as well. So, and that's where music becomes so instrumental. You know, you'll have some songs which are just all about love and compassion, and you're probably going to feel a whole lot of it. And you're going to have some songs which are full of grief and sorrow. You're going to go into the grief and sorrow. You know, we're curating it in such a way that we hope it's going to pick apart at all of these different aspects of your personality and all these different aspects of your ego fringes and pull out the stuff that needs to be cleared and filtered. Me personally, almost always have a big ego battle. I've been someone who was, you know, classically quite a egotistical, quite a control freak kind of guy. So tripping presented the most difficult of environments. It was the moment where this part of me that protected me had to step aside and was never happy to do so. So there'd be this internal conflict that would happen each trip. I'd like to think that nowadays, having done the work that I've done, it's not a major player in my life. But if I'm coming from an environment where I've been performing, let's say, or working really hard, and egos had to be here because I needed to perform, I cannot just go from that environment to a trip surrender. I kind of need a medium space. So I would take a day or two off. I'd have a nice, easy, breezy couple of days where I'm taking care of myself and then do a trip. The transition from one to the other can be very difficult if you just throw yourself from one environment to the next.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a very interesting point that you made there about, I aligned with you when you said, I'm someone who's we have a battle with the ego a lot as well, and I always remind myself when I'm like, it's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice. And that's what kind of brings me back in and centers me. Yeah. I think, there's a fine line, of course, between ego and confidence, but when you're a level of, performing or in a leadership role, certainly, to an audience, or if you're doing anything live, I know you've done some live talks and various other things as well. You kind of need that edge sometimes, and it gives you that bit of confidence boost to have an ego. I think ego's looked at as a bad thing, a bit of a demonic thing. Always got a big ego, but I don't think so. I think it's there's a fine line between that and confidence.
Sure. I mean, I'd sorry to interrupt. I'd take that a little bit differently. I'd say there's a fine line between arrogance and confidence. A healthy ego is absolutely necessary. It's when it becomes unhealthy and you're overcompensating for a sense of inadequacy inside. That's when you get problems. But I'd say everyone you have on your podcast who's a successful entrepreneur needs to have a healthy ego. Some of them need to have an unhealthy ego because that's what helps them actually perform. But the goal is to always kind of balance the two, to have Jake and to have Jake's ego in the room together. Together they help you perform and they help you achieve your best.
Now, that's why you're the psychotherapist, and that's why I'm the podcast host. Because you pretty much felt that I did, my friend.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned something just back there about, and I've got a couple of questions on the side here, Malcolm. I will ask them to Yury in a minute for you. Thank you very much. About set and setting, you mentioned set and setting. Would you like to explain a little bit more about that? Because that's a term used a lot with psychedelics, and I think it's quite important that it's a really important part of it.
And I'm quite embarrassed because I always get the two confused in terms of which one means what. But like, just stay with me here. One of them refers to, and I think it's what I was saying earlier, to your external environment. How have you prepared for it? Sorry, not how have you prepared for it, what's around you. So ideally, when I'm doing psychedelic therapy, I'm in nature. There's no people that are triggering to me. There's no stimulus that's triggering to me. I'm feeling relaxed, I'm feeling calm, and for me that makes sure as best as possible that my ego activation is down and that the real Yury is there as much as possible. The other one, setting, always confusing to me, but is your internal environment, to make sure that you're prepared, to make sure that your intentions are clear to you, and intentions are essentially it's a question that I like to have, what you're hoping to get out of the session. It's very different to expectations. People that come to a trip with expectations almost always leave disappointed. The goal is to have a clear set of questions of what you want to achieve and a clear set of goals. But when you get to the moment of tripping, you throw your hands up in the air and you say, I'm surrendering to the process that's going to happen right now. If you try to control it, you're probably going to miss the whole experience. So it's that fine juggling thing between those two.
Yeah. And again, I can speak from personal experience here of, having to let that control go. I remember a time of smoking some DMT, which I can never. What's the long term? What does DMT stand for? No, I'm tested.
Couldn't tell you, mate. Dimethyl something, but yeah.
Dimethyl tryptamine, I think, or something similar. Yeah. Anyway, it's I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, it comes from a plant that I think can be found. It's found in South America and Australia. I'm not sure.
DMT itself is in every single living cell on Earth, as far as I'm concerned. But the source of DMT usually comes from, I think most of us get it from acacia. tree bark.
Okay.
And there's also 5-MeO-DMT, which is now becoming quite popular. It's like the Everest of a DMT experience that comes from a particular toad in South America.
Wow, that sounds like another level stuff. But I remember, I remember smoking it loads of times and smoking it with a very good friend of mine, and they were having the exact same amount from them and me, and I was just like, they were like, "This is awesome," and they're like, I was like, "It's not doing anything to me at all. It's just it's not doing anything." And I had some more, and had some more, and had some more, and it wasn't doing anything at all. It just wasn't switching any kind of switches for me at all. And then one New Year, while we were having a party out in the bush, out in the country, I said, "Can I have some of that stuff, please?" And I loaded up the pipe and I went off to a quiet part of the bush on my own. And before I did it, I took a few moments to just have a word with myself and say, "Jake, be accepting of what is to come, and just go with it. Just go with it. Don't try and control it. Just go with it." And that was the time when I went into it and had just an experience that was just that was the one time I was like, I was in a completely different. I was there in the place and I could see everything that was going on, but it had a completely different dimension and filter to it. In that everything was it was like everything was in neon lights. It was crazy. And then I remember looking at my hand and I could see straight through my hand. It was like looking at an X-ray of my own hand, but a live one moving. It was just insane. But I mean, my main point is I had to surrender to it. I had to surrender to it fully to even be able to get into the zone. And I think that goes back to what we were saying about, this element of myself that, and you said there's parts of you as well that, as someone who's a leader, a protagonist, wants to always be in control. And when it comes to psychedelics, you have to completely let that go to be able to enjoy the experience and get the real benefit from it.
Yeah. If we extrapolate that further, that I'm finding in my life, you can apply that to everyday life. The only thing that's given in our life is that things are going to change all the time. And so many of us keep wanting to hold on to stuff, whether it's businesses, whether it's relationships, whatever it is. And the moment you surrender, the moment you stop trying to control the environment, there's so much more peace and ability to function in the world. So I find that my work with psychedelics is a beautiful mirror for my life and my attitude towards life in general.
Yeah, something a very wise man said to me recently was relinquish control and have faith. And, I've been running with that ever since, and it's been working for me. Excuse me. Malcolm Free, a gentleman I had on the podcast previously, has asked a question on the side here, and I'll get this up on the screen. Malcolm said, "Being labelled with PTSD myself, I know Malcolm used to be in the military for many years, where can I safely go to and read any research publications on the subject? Would you know anywhere, Yury?"
I would start, is this gentleman in the States?
He's in the States, yes, correct, yeah.
The MAPS website, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, is the main American organization that's pushing MDMA and psilocybin for PTSD. They've got a comprehensive databases of research in this direction, and they partner with all the other organizations around the world, including My Medicine Australia here, that all kind of share publications that come out. So I think if you start with MAPS, they'll have a list of publications and you'll be able to find some amazing research there.
Okay. Is that maps.org?
Yeah.
Cool. Wonderful. Put that in the comments. Thanks for your question, Malcolm. Hope that clears it up. I've accidentally put a lot of other stuff in the comments, but that doesn't matter. Always good to have some questions, and I can see there's quite a lot of you watching, so thanks for watching, guys, from all around the world. Always awesome to have people watching and joining us, and if you do have any other questions, then this is probably a pretty rare chance for you to ask someone who is working in this space, so please go ahead and do. Now, Yury, like I've said, the world is opening up to this psychedelic treatment. It's not being seen as the demon anymore. It's not being seen as the elephant in the room. It's actually, and when you look at kind of, I guess what you could call I wouldn't class cannabis as a psychedelic really, but it does have some obviously psychoactive effects. So I guess you could, depend on how you look at it. But that part of it has been completely opened up now. Particularly in America, in the UK, it's coming to a point where certainly in America, you can just go into a shop, ask them what you need, and they'll sell you cannabis over the counter. And I don't think it'll be too long. Much of the rest of the world has already followed suit, and until we see something like a similar model in Australia. But where do you kind of see, I know you would have your finger on the pulse, certainly a lot more, and I'm not just talking about cannabis, but the wider stuff and some of the stuff we've just been talking about, practicing with MDMA, DMT, and psilocybin. Where do you kind of see the industry heading in the next 3 to 5 years?
When you say industry, you mean in the country or globally?
Well, both. Why not? I guess start with whichever one you like.
I mean, the states have done incredible stuff. The West Coast, Oregon's decriminalized drugs altogether.
Really, altogether? I didn't know that.
All drugs have been decriminalized. LA, I think, have a bid in Congress or wherever they have their discussions to decriminalize psychedelics. They're in phase 3 trials throughout America, which means we're hopefully less than 18 months away from legal prescription of MDMA and psilocybin for treatment-resistant PTSD. Australia, still behind. We're trying to push reform with the TGA, but I have a feeling I'm very optimistic when it comes to this kind of stuff. Australia tends to follow America quite closely, so once America gets it across the line, things will move here very, very rapidly. Again, I've been interviewed about this topic a bit before, and I tend to be the most optimistic in the room. But I would be saying 3 to 5 years, you're going to have this treatment available in Australia.
Well, I think there's nothing wrong with being the most optimistic person in the room, Yury. Like me, you're an entrepreneur, and the thing about entrepreneur is that they are often optimists, and an optimist sees an opportunity. An optimist sees an opportunity in everything, whereas a pessimist sees quite the opposite as a challenge in everything. So I think it's always important to remain optimistic as an entrepreneur, and that's not been easy, particularly for anyone that's watching me. I have a lot of people watching this that are in the business and entrepreneurial world, or perhaps want to switch into it. Been a tough time for that, and I think that's probably a good segue to talk about a bit of that, because I know you've, as well as psychedelic psychotherapy, you opened up a gym within the past 18 months, a bouldering gym, which I've been hanging out at a bit and really enjoying, learning how to climb, which is challenging and always lots of fun, and you always end up with I've learned to stretch my forearms before I do it, because they're the things that really get smashed. It's always good fun, but I mean, opening up a gym in the middle of the pandemic and being constantly, really difficult, and I've seen this firsthand how difficult it's been for you, mate, because it's constantly, the thing about being an entrepreneur is you go into it partly because of the freedom of being able to do your own thing, being your own boss, being able to, lead your own team, but it's really difficult, owning a gym and actually being constantly abashed by these rules that are always changing all the time. You can be open, you can't be open, you can have this many people, you can have that many people. So, I mean, imagine it's been a pretty tough time in that respect for that business.
Absolutely. I mean, and there's not just the gym. I've got a real estate company that's sort of based on shared accommodation, which is largely dependent on international student and traveller market. I think, owning multiple businesses in a world that is completely destabilized by any kind of normality is extremely challenging. It's extremely stressful. And optimism is what kept me alive and kept me going. That and a bit of psychedelic therapy definitely helped along the process. But
I've had plenty of, sorry to go across you, I've had plenty of the first dose. Maybe I need a little bit more of the second. I'm always optimistic. Maybe I need to start exploring the psychedelic parts again. And I'll be open about that. I've really been thinking about that, and I think it's something would you say, we're flicking back to it now, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that because it relates to business. Do you think you have to be in the right headspace to be able to Take Psychedelics. And when I say that, I mean that your intentions are clear and pure when you go in.
When you're taking psychedelics, or when you're starting your business?
Yeah, like if you're highly stressed, you know, and you've had a really tough couple of weeks, maybe even couple of months, and you think, oh, you know, I'll take a trip and see how that works out for me. Do you think that's a kind of an optimum state and place to do that in?
In my experience, if I'm highly stressed and I take a trip, the trip amplifies my stress, which means I have an opportunity to deal with it then and there. But if I can't, then the whole trip is just this turbulent ride of me trying to surrender and let go. So I try to, even if my life is full of stress, I try to create a certain bubble around the trip of a few days where I'm in a Zen-like state as possible. And then hopefully I'm in a much better capacity to handle the stress if it comes up during the trip itself.
Yeah, well, I guess creating that bubble is important. And when you've got a beautiful country spot like you have, that can be easy to create that bubble, of course.
Sure.
Yeah. How do you have any, you know, a lot of people will be watching this also, you know, two of their business, you know, one of them is a real estate company, which is directly affected by, you know, a lot of people who rent at your places are people who come into this country in tourism every year, and we've just not had that this year. And, you know, the gyms have been, I think next to events, really, gyms are one of the industries that's been smashed probably the most by COVID. Could be wrong, that's of course my perception, but and you know, psychotherapy, I mean, that could have been something that's trended upwards because a lot of people have been struggling with stuff. So there's always pushes and pulls. But how do you continue to remain optimistic throughout?
It has a lot to do with my self-development. So I think I mentioned at the very start of the show that I carried a lot of toxic shame, and how that expressed itself professionally was anything that looked like a failure, smelt like a failure, ultimately felt like a failure. And it wasn't just the business that was failing, it was me failing as an individual, that there was inherently something wrong with me. The work that I've done where I've purged that shame and I've come to, I guess, the real me, I can separate the successes and failures of a business or any aspect of life from that of myself. So I guess I'm quite aloof when it comes to all of it. If the business fails, it failed, so be it. I'll move on with my life, I'll start something new. I try not to take things personally, I guess is the answer to your question. For me, there was something romantic about COVID and a lot of businesses going down. It's like, well, I didn't fail. There's a collective destruction going on, and we're all going down together, which means we'll all probably transform and rebuild into new people with new businesses, and it's okay. That was a big part of my mantra, and I think it's what continues to drive my entrepreneurial spirit, because I'm not afraid of the loss or the failure. I don't see it as a loss or a failure. It's just, okay, that opportunity happened, I'm going straight for the next opportunity, and that's fine.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it. You know, don't be afraid to fail. It's part of success. You know, it's the two things are on the same side of the same coin. You know, and it can be a very fine line between them sometimes. And I think a lot of people have lost businesses and projects and things like that in COVID, but also there's been a lot of brand new ones born. The amount of people I know who have just took something they enjoyed doing, whether it was, you know, baking cakes or growing vegetables or doing graphic design, and thought, you know, I could do a bit more of this and start charging people money for it. And I think when people start turning their passion into a side hustle, which later becomes a business, and when you're working in something that is your passion, you never feel like you're actually working, but you start getting rewarded financially for it because you're very good at it and you're actually living your calling. I think that's a really nice place to be, and I think that's actually a really positive and on the subject of optimism and an optimistic thing to look at and trend that's come out of COVID as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Now we get to the end of the show, and I've really enjoyed spending some time with you, mate, as I always do. But it's nice to explore this.
I'm just getting warmed up.
Oh, well, we've got another 20 minutes. I'm sure we could use the time.
Sure.
How about the word hustle, Yury? Of course, it features in the title of this podcast, and I like to ask every single guest that comes on the show how they define the word hustle and what's driven their hunger for it.
It's a favorite word of mine. I see myself as a hustler. That's how I define myself.
Yeah.
From humble beginnings of just trying to earn a buck, to, I guess, hustling bigger enterprises. How do I define the word hustle? Slightly shadily making your way across the world, and something like that.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
shadily putting one foot in front of the other with the intentions to step out into the light and be successful. Yeah.
I think what you've touched on is interesting there, because a lot of people think of sometimes when I think of the word hustle, and I think about it a lot, I think about the word hustle and what it means to me, and I find it's something that I can never quite define because it always seems to change and evolve. But a lot of the time when I think of it, I think of like someone on a street corner in a really busy city, probably selling something illicit, or just like, selling stuff out of car boots, or selling stuff, that's perhaps a bit shady. That's what comes to my mind. And I think that can be, for what a lot of people is how they started hustling. I mean, my first ever hustle was selling, what do they call them? Call them lollies here in Australia. For the rest of the world, that's sweets and candy. On the playground at school, I'd literally go and like buy multi-packs from the cash and carry store, from Costco or what have you, and then I'd sell them on the playground, and pretty much every day I'd get told I wasn't allowed to do it, get all the stuff taken off me, then I'd go and get it back at the end of school, and then I'd just do it again the next day, and it just went on for years like that. And I think it does, like you said, it just starts from wanting to make a buck and wanting to make your own way in the world and not have to rely on this trade of perhaps your time for someone else's money, or being under the guise of someone else that says you have to work in this certain building for so many hours a day, and at the end of this week period or month period, I'm going to give you this money. But, don't have too much fun in these couple of days that you're going to get in between, because I want you right back on here Monday, and I want you to do the same thing for the same money, but probably work harder. And for me, that, it always rubbed me up the wrong way. And that's why in the end I ended up switching to being a full-time entrepreneur, which is something I did last year, which, for anyone who's watching this, and I know like the part of the reason I do this podcast is to inspire as well, to go into interesting subjects like we have today, like psychedelic psychotherapy, but to inspire you guys to go for it, start that side hustle, start earning your own cash. It doesn't have to be an instant transformation where you're like, I'm going to quit my job and do it straight away. In fact, I really wouldn't advise that, because that can leave you in a bit of a dangerous situation. But just go forth and explore things. And once you find something that you're passionate in, just do it more and more and more and more. Because when you do more of what you enjoy in life and less of what you don't enjoy, life just becomes a lot more happier and wholesome. So you got any tips, Yury, on for anyone that would be wanting to step into the world of business and entrepreneurship? Because, I know you weren't always there. I know you used to, remember when you were it wasn't something I ever experienced, but you used to work in a chicken shop with and they used to call you the rooster with the mohawk.
Absolutely. Yeah. Humble beginnings, as I said. Yeah.
Sorry, I had to mention it.
Chicken shop while hustling out the back. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the way.
But the advice that I would give for anyone who wants to go in any entrepreneurial direction is, if you can try and marry your work with your artistic expression, you're going to be a happier person. Don't pick a hustle, don't pick a career that just brings money. Pick one where you can really flower in it. And if you can marry your work with your artistic expression, you're going to have a smile on your face most of the time. Your work is not going to feel like work. It's going to feel like art. And you're going to be experiencing flow states more and more, which I think is one of the secrets to life.
Oh yeah, flow states. That's what we like. We're just in that that state where everything just, flows. Silly way to put it, but everything just happens.
There we go. Yeah.
In synchronicity, everything seems to be happening in fortuitous timing. You're surrounded by people, things, and environments that just build you up. It's a great place to be. Really is a great place to be. And Shout out to flow state.
If my ideas are correct, then you're going to be in a flow state whilst paying me money in a couple of hours and climbing on the wall.
It's Monday night, of course. Yeah, you're right.
So flow states of work are going to be married soon, and it's going to be magical.
There you go. How about that for a segue? We're about to enter a flow state right now this evening. Yeah, of course. And I mean, shout out to Boulder Project as well. Let me just get the website. Is it boulderproject.com.au?
That's the one. Yeah,
that's the one. Bouldering as well. I mean, why not? Let's talk about bouldering, because I think I've only just really got into it, and I really have, really only got into it. I know you've climbed at many places all around the world for years, haven't you? And I think that bouldering is one of those things. It's like a lot of things. It's like a run I went for this morning, actually. I started going running, to try and just be a healthier human and lose some fat and feel a bit more better in my own skin about 2 months ago. And when I started, I could just about run for 10 or 15 minutes. And I was pouring with sweat. My chest was killing me. And I just felt like a weakling, really, to be honest, because I couldn't get very far. And now this morning I did a 45-minute run. I had one brief stop to check how far I'd come, and that was for about 30 seconds. And I got home thinking I could have gone further. And it's baby steps, it's small steps along the way in all these things that we try that are physical, that build us up to a great place of really a flow state, And I think bouldering is one of those ones that it's tough, and you look at it and you step back and you think, well, that doesn't look too bad. I could just get from there to there, there to there. But when you're actually in it and your arms and your legs start burning, and I still always have that little fear in me, like, oh, I'm a bit high up here. I know it's a crash mat, but still feels like I could hurt myself if I fell the wrong way. But that's my scope of knowledge of bouldering and how you can relate that to life. You start off at something, you're okay, you're average at it, but you just got to keep going until you get to a point where one day you'll look back and you'll be like, I'm actually proficient in this now. I actually know what I'm doing, and it didn't really actually take me that long because I stuck at it and I kept working hard.
Yeah, and once you get good at it, there's the next problem around the corner, and you just got to kind of open your arms and be ready for the next adventure. So again, I've got a fantastic metaphor for life, and I think it's a sport like most sports where you can lose yourself in it. You don't have to think. You don't have to feel judged. You don't have to think what other people are thinking of you. You climb, you have a good time, you learn something, you fall back down, you start again.
Simple as that, yeah. Come climb, have a good time. There you go. There's a new motto for the business.
Yeah.
I'll submit my fee tonight for that piece of marketing I've just given you. I'll be there at 6 p.m.
Nice.
I think that's a wrap, Yury. Is there anything you'd like to leave us with or raise at the end of the show? Or do you think we've covered everything in entirety?
Yeah, I feel like if anyone wants to know more about psychedelic therapy or is interested in working with me, you can leave them my website and just provide some information. Cool. Other than that, I'm always up for a chat. So if anyone ever has any questions, just feel free to give me a call. I'm accessible on every single platform that exists. And I'd be happy to answer questions.
Wonderful. And I've put Yury's website in the links there, folks. For anyone listening back on the audio, it is of course, it's always that bit, innerfocustherapy.com.au, innerfocustherapy.com.au. And actually, I think with a quick Google of the name Yury Shamis, you'll find him pretty easily. He's always putting out lots of good, insightful, really thoughtful stuff on Facebook as well, which I enjoy interacting with. So I'm sure you'll find him there. But just a big thank you as we sign off to everyone that watches the show. 97 hours in now, rapidly approaching triple digits, and getting a lot of love and support from everyone who watches the show all around the world. And I'm really grateful for all you guys watching on whatever platform you watch on. So if you've enjoyed the show, please share it with your family and friends and take a minute to subscribe and leave us a review. That is all from us today, folks. I will be back on Wednesday with another show. In the meantime, stay happy, stay healthy, stay hungry, and keep on hustling. Thank you for your time, Yury. Thank you for joining me. Appreciate it.